Hi, Elaine here. This time I'll be sharing how you can create a perfect trifold brochure in Affinity Publisher. We're not stopping at just creating a trifold brochure either. Stay to the end for the bonus tips and you'll learn how to export your individual trifold brochure panels as images and use a free mock-up to showcase your final artwork. If you want to follow along, all the resources you'll need are linked to in the description below. First thing to do, create a new Affinity Publisher file. So Command and N or File New. I do need it to be A4, but I'm going to need to make some changes in here. Not much needs to change on the layout, but in the pages I don't need facing pages. I am going to use 2 pages, but I don't want them facing. Colour-wise, I am going to send this to print, so I'm going to choose CMYK. And my colour profile is Fogra 39. Your mileage may vary on that. Margins, I want them all the same and they only need to be 10mm. I'm going to enable the lock, which means I only have to change one of these to 10. All of them change. Finally, on here, there's the bleed, and I do want to bleed, and I want the bleed to be 3mm. And that is pretty much it in there. Now, if this is something I'm going to do frequently, it's probably a good idea to save this as a preset. So over on the left-hand side, I click the Add New Preset, and I'll call this Trifold. I will put it in the print section. You can change the icon of it if you choose. I'll leave it the same and click OK. And it adds it at the bottom there. Another thing I can do is click the heart icon on that, make it a favourite, and when I filter at the top you can see my trifold appears as a favourite in there. At that point I can just click create and I am in to my file. Now I did choose A4. The best sizes for this are probably A4 or letter, and that will depend if you're using metric or imperial. I'm in the UK, so I used A4, which is 210mm wide by 297mm tall. Obviously though, mine is portrait, so it's the other way round. I know in the US it's much more common to use imperial inches, but the good news is the way that I'll be doing the calculations is exactly the same, irrespective of what system your version of Affinity Publisher is set to use. The first thing to do is to sort out the master pages that are required, and there are going to be 2 of those. So double click to make that active. Now, by default it's called Master A, but you can right click on that, go to Spread Properties, and in the label section give it a more meaningful name. And this is actually the outside of the brochure, so I'm going to call it outside. And the first thing I need to do is to split this A4 page into 3 blocks which are going to represent the panels. The way I'm going to do that is to use guides. So I'm going to drag 2 guides on. Now obviously these are completely in the wrong place, but I'm going to use a trick to put them in the right place without having to move them manually. So I'm hovering over the first guide and double clicking, and this shows me where those guides are at the moment. What I'm going to do is double click in there, and instead of typing it in, now if it's A4 it's easy, but if it's letter it's a little bit trickier. So I know the full width of this is 297mm, so I'm going to put that in. But I only need it 1/3 of the way in. So if I divide that by 3, yes, you can add calculations in here, and then just press enter. It will move that guide to 99mm, which is indeed 1/3 of 297. The next one, little bit more complicated, but nothing to worry about. Exactly the same thing, so 297 divided by 3, but this time I'm putting it in brackets. And I should probably put millimetres on that as well, shouldn't I? But I'm dividing it by 3. But I don't want it at the 1/3 mark. I want it at the 2/3 mark. So I'm going to multiply the answer by 2. Press enter, and it puts it at 2 times 99, which is 198. So as I say, you can do that irrespective of the measurement units you have decided to use. It all works in the same way. So we have the guides. Now I'm going to use those guides when I'm adding my text frames. I'm putting the text frame up to the margin and dragging it across to that first guide. But that isn't quite correct. That is, if we look down in the transform panel, 89mm. Now we need to have a gap on the right hand side the same as on the left hand side, because the guide is indicating the fold point. It's not a margin. So it needs to be the size it is, but minus the margin, which is 10 millimeters. So if I take 10 off there, 79 is actually the right width for it. Then all I need to do is hold the Option key down and copy that to the middle and position it where I see the green line and the red line indicating it's in the right place. I have snapping turned on to help with that. Then repeat that process, hold the Option key down, drag across, and this time I am bumping it up to the right hand margin. And there are my text frames. Now I do want the background of this to be a brown colour. So I'm going to put a shape on here which covers the whole thing, and the colour needs to be 190907 and press enter. And now it's the right colour. However, it's not in the right place. It's sitting on top of the text frames, which means it would obscure them. So remembering this is the master, I'm going to drag that down and put it underneath the text frames. And that is the first master done. The second master is very similar to this first one, so I'm going to right click and duplicate it. Right click again and go into the spread properties, and I'm going to change the label because this time it's inside. And actually, when I say it's very similar, it's identical. Apart from the fact that on this inside one, I'm going to add an image. The image is going to be in the lower right hand corner, and I'm putting in a frame to hold that image. Then I need to go and get the image, which I have on my other screen. So I'm going to drag and drop it into there, and that is the image that I want. Now, it is problematic in terms of it has a very sharp edge at the top and bottom, which wouldn't look great when my content is in there. Now, one thing you could think about doing is adding some transparency to it so it blends in better. The problem with that, there's my image, is if I go and get the transparency tool, and I think I'll take that across from there. Yes, it works. It blends in beautifully. But in addition to the left-hand edge blending in, I need the top edge blending in. And if I go to the top and pull down, you can see it's only capable of providing one position for the transparency. So pretty much that is not going to work. There's another option which would involve adding a pixel mask in Affinity Photo using Studio Link. But let's assume that you only have Affinity Publisher. What can you do in those circumstances? Easy answer, cheat. So what I'm going to do is get a shape, and I am going to make it the same width as the image, like that. And then I'm going to put a gradient fill in it. I'm going to pull down there a gradient fill. Right, first thing is it's behind the picture. So my gradient needs to be above the picture, but the picture is going to need to be in the background. Next thing I need to do, this colour at the bottom is terrible. So I'm going to change that, and I'm going to change it to the same colour, which was 190907, and press enter. The difference is this time though, when I go into here, I'm going to change the opacity of that colour to nothing. And then I can use the V key to come out of gradient editing mode and move that down until it softens up the edges and it looks like it blends in. Not bad, not bad. Might need to make that bigger. Take it up a little bit. Let's move it down a bit. Let's see how that works. There we go. It's a lot softer. And to make it even easier, I am going to select that shape, hold the Option key and duplicate it, Shift key and rotate it, which the Shift key snaps it, and then move it into place over the left-hand edge and take it down to there. And that way I have managed there, I think I'll make it a little bit wider, I have managed to put some transparency on the edge of this so it blends in a little bit better in two directions. That's the clever bit. Okay, so I've sorted my master pages out. By default, the outside master is applied to both of these. So to make sure, I'm going to drag that one on again, and the inside one, dragging that to the inside page at the bottom. So let's start work on page 1. Now with a trifold brochure, you need to understand here which panel is which. The one on the right is going to be the cover. The one in the middle is going to be the back, and the one on the left-hand side is the one that folds inside. That's the first thing you see when you open the brochure. So that's what we're working towards with that. To do that, I'm going to add a picture placeholder here, a photo frame to that, which covers 2 panels. And then I'm going to drag and drop an image into it, which is going to be for the cover. I did tell Affinity Publisher that I wanted it to embed the images. Because this image is quite large, it is reminding me, are you sure you still want to do that? It's actually asking me to link to the image instead, which I don't want. So I'm going to say no to that, and that will load the image in here. I have already created 2 assets, which I have in an assets panel here for the branding. So I'm going to drag that on. That one is about in the middle there. And the other one is a little bit lower, and it's going on this panel, which is going to be the one on the back. Right, the next thing I need to do is to add the text for this panel, which is the 5th panel over here. So I'm going to click, so I've got in there, ready to put the text in. I actually have the text in a text file, so I'm just copying that off screen. I'm going to come into here and paste it in. Now, I haven't changed any defaults in here in terms of text styles, and that's why we can barely see it. Now, rather than waste time creating text styles, while you can't export text styles, you can import them. So I'm going to select import, and I have my styles available for import. So I'm going to open that. It is telling me that 3 of those styles are clashing with styles I already have in here. And that's the top 3. The styles I'll be using in here are the menu styles and the headings. So what I'm going to do with all of these is just replace the existing style. I don't need anything that I've already got. So that will bring in the text styles. It puts them underneath base. I can go into here, Command and A to select all of the text, and I'm going to style this with the menu item banquet, which will make it white and it will make it smaller. That's not all I need to do with it, because this is the banquet menu. So the text at the top needs to be a heading 1. And then within it, we have different banquet styles. So we have banquet A, which is going to be a heading 2. We have banquet B, which again is going to be a heading 2. And finally, I do believe, banquet C, which is there. And that is going to be a heading 2. That is then the outside elements of that all done. So I'm going to move on to page 2. This one is a little bit easier in terms of all the graphics we need are already there. I do have 3 text panels in here that I'm going to put some text in. So again, I have that on my other monitor. So I'm opening it up, I am selecting it and copying it and bringing it in here. So just paste it in. Again, it's not styled at this point, but if I select all of the text, and this time it's not the banquet, it's actually menu items, it will show me the menu items. I still need here to format some heading 1s and heading 2s. So mains is a heading 1, but then the poultry dishes and some of the others are heading 2s. Another issue that has come at this point is that I didn't link these frames together, because I didn't know at the time I created the masters whether I would need to use this in situations where I don't want the frames linked. But I can do that now. The reason I know that there is overflowing text is the red eyeball and the red triangle. Turning the eyeball on, just clicking it, will show you the overflowing text. Clicking on the arrow will enable me to link frame 1 to frame 2, and doing that again will link frame 2 to frame 3. Then I need to go back and finish my styling, which is to add some heading 2s to these. So vegetarian dishes is a 2, rice and noodles is a 2, and the fillet steak dishes is a 2. There we go. Now looking at that, I can see I've got my image, which I did mention and then forgot to move it. You can see that the mask on the image is cutting through the text. That is an issue in the template, where if we look at the layers, we have our masks at the top and the images, and it's over the text frame. So I'm going to group those together and put them between the last text frame and the background. When I go back to it, it will be behind it, not cutting through it anymore. And that is the inside of the menu sorted out. At that point, you need to produce this for sharing purposes. I should probably save it, to be honest. So let me save that in the root of my demo as menu and choose File, Export. There are some pre-flight warnings on this. The majority of these are spelling mistakes. So I know that they're not actually mistakes. They're just words that aren't in the dictionary. So I'm going to ignore and continue. In here, I make a decision what type of output I want. Obviously, it's PDF in this case because it's to go to print, but you do have other options available. And because it's going to print, I'm going to say for print. The one thing I need to enable in here is scrolling all the way down, and I have include printer's marks, and I need the printer's marks if this is going to print. And then just hit export. I'm going to save that in the folder for print, which is number 2. So menu, and there we go. Now I need to produce a version that can be uploaded to a website. It's very important to get the format correct for this, because not only do you want it without the bleed area and the printer's marks, but it's also important if you have any links in there that they are clickable. So going back to File and Export, again ignoring and continuing with the pre-flight. I do want a PDF, but this time in my preset I want to choose Digital High Quality. That will give me a high quality output and it will make the links clickable. So I'm going to export that and put that in the other folder, which was for digital distribution, and save that file. Now to have a look what those files look like and see the difference between them. This is the for print one, which has the printer's marks on it. It has the date, the time, the full works. And the other one for digital distribution looks more like you would expect it to. It has no bleed on it, it has no instructions on it or anything else. So it does look like it has, but if we close the background, you can see there's no edges on that. That is ready to use as is. So we've output it. So that takes us on to bonus time. Now, while it's easy to export the document in its entirety, exporting each panel as a discrete image takes a little bit more work. It's completely optional, of course. You might have no need to do this, but it's a great way to be able to showcase your design. Now, Affinity Publisher doesn't let you add slices to your files, but if you have Affinity Designer, it's easy to do that. Now, you may be thinking, but just a minute, if we go to File and we go to Export, Images was an option. From our formats here, we could have selected JPEG, and indeed you could. But the problem is you're exporting the whole thing. You're exporting 3 panels per image. And the problem with that is you would then have to slice them on your own. And if you needed to make changes, you'd have to repeat the process and it would take much longer. So Affinity Designer is where it is at for that. It has dedicated tools to do the job. Now, the Affinity file formats for each of their applications are 100% compatible with all of the other applications. So editing an Affinity Publisher file inside Affinity Designer won't cause any problems at all. In fact, Affinity have a great system called Studio Link, where from within Affinity Publisher you can access the Affinity Designer or Affinity Photo tools. And that's available in the top left-hand corner. So now we are in effect inside Affinity Designer using the Affinity Designer toolset. And I'd love to be using Studio Link here, but it doesn't support what we need to actually do with the file. Luckily, there is another way to work. So I'm going back. I'm now not using the designer tools. I'm back in the publisher toolset. Making sure I have saved the file, I'm going to click on File and Edit in Designer. This is an alternative way to access the designer toolset. First thing to notice with this, if I zoom out, you can see no matter how far I zoom out, I can only see one page. In this case, it's the inside. It hasn't deleted the other page. If you use the navigation at the bottom, you can navigate between your publisher pages inside Designer. Now, the tool in here that I need to export this is the Export Persona. And the navigation in here is exactly the same. I navigate between page 1 and page 2. Now, the tool I need to use is the Slice tool, which is already selected by default. And what the Slice tool does is it allows you to create a discrete area of this document, which will export independently of the rest of it. So I'm moving to the edge of my document and I'm putting in there the first slice. It's actually easier to do the first one and then go all the way across to the right and do the one on the right and finally do the middle one. That way it all snaps into place and you know it's absolutely correct. That has created slice 1, 2 and 3 here. I'm going to double click to rename them so we know which slices they are. So I'm calling this a panel. So this is panel number 5. This one, which is slice 2 at the moment, is going to be panel number 1 because it's the cover. This one is the back, so it's the final panel, which is going to be panel 6. And it's easier to name these now than it is export them and then fiddle with them later. So I'm moving from page 1 to page 2 and repeating that process. At the moment there's only the single slice there, which is menu 2, but I'm adding in the first panel for that. Then I'm adding in the last one over on the right. And finally, I will go and put the one in the middle. Then I need to rename them. So this one here is panel 2. This one in the middle is actually panel 4. And the one at the bottom is panel 3. Now, the next step is to export these. What I don't need exported is the entire A4 side. So I take the option off there, and what it's going to export is these bottom 3. So I'm going to hit export and I am going to put them in the panels folder, and that will export 3 panels. I need to move back to page 1, take the option off the first one but leave the other 3 on, and then export those slices. That will give me 6 images in my folder. If we preview those, there's 1 and 2, 3, 4, 5, back cover, which is 6. We're ready to go. That was the first bonus. Now, at the moment, this is open in Affinity Designer, and I have made changes to it. I've added the slices. So from inside Affinity Designer, I'm going to save the file. And if I want to pass that back to do more work with it in Affinity Publisher, all I need to do is use File, Edit in Publisher. It will close it in Designer and open it back up in Publisher. And as you can see, although those slices are there, it's not impacting negatively how I use this file inside Publisher. Time for the second bonus. Having the graphics is one thing, these 6 panels, but the reason that we've done that is to showcase it. So I have a mockup available. So I'm going to open that mockup and it will open it in Affinity Photo. This is because it is a Photoshop file, but it has not opened it correctly. It has opened it in the default way, which is I have an image of the cover in the middle page and the left page. These are at the top. I also have inside a mock-up, and when I open that, I also have the cover, the middle page and the left page. The problem is, while this is a Photoshop file, and while it is Smart Object enabled, by default, Affinity Photo does not care. It opens it up without enabling the Smart Objects. But we can fix that. So let's close the file. Before you open the file, go to Affinity Photo Settings, and in the General section you have an option under Other, which is Import PSD Smart Objects where possible. I think that should be enabled by default, but it's not. But put a tick in the box and it will remember that. So I'm going back and opening exactly the same file again, but this time it opens in a different way. These 3 at the top have the symbol to tell you that they're an embedded document. Also, in our mock-up, they are embedded documents. More importantly, in the mock-up, they actually have a perspective applied to them, which is what's making it look like a mock-up. Now, for reasons I'm not going to get into today, but if you want to know more about it, let me know. We don't need these top ones. They're just confusing the issue, so let's get rid of that. And just because I can, I'm going to fix the adjustment spelling there. Because I can. And anyway, if you're anything like as OCD as me, it would be bothering you. So now it's fixed. These are the layers that are important here. They are embedded documents which Adobe Photoshop call Smart Objects. So what I'm going to do is open this one. This is the front cover. What I need to do is go to my panels, and if this is the front cover, it's panel 1, and I'm dragging and dropping the exported image, the PNG, and I am putting it in there. It needs a little bit of help to fit just perfectly. And then when I close this embedded file, it comes through here and it's part of the mockup. That is what the Smart Object enables to happen. That's why it's there. So this middle page here, that is actually the back cover, which in my case is panel 6. So drag and drop panel 6 on there, and again position it. That one needs a little bit of help as well, fractionally too small, but that'll do. There we go. Close that one. It ripples through and it looks correct. And the last one here we have is the left page, which is going to be the banquet page, which was number 5. So I'm going to bring in panel 5 and drop that and move it into place. That one fits perfectly, go figure. And when I close that, I have my mock-up. Now, if I want to showcase the inside, I can still use this file because I can open this up. This one is the one on the right. So all I need to add to that is panel 4. I put that in, and I don't even have to remove the other one. I can just put this one on the top of that one. And when I come out of there, that is on the right-hand side. The left-hand side would be panel 2, which is the start of the main menu there. So come out of that one, and finally the middle one, which is panel 3. And bring that one in and position it like that. Close that, and now we're showcasing the inside. And that is how you make a mock-up. Let's have a quick recap. We started from scratch with a new file, then added guides at 1/3 and 2/3 of the width of your page. We created 2 master pages, added the required content and placeholders to those master pages, added the actual content to the content pages, then exported for print, replete with printer's marks, then exported for digital distribution with clickable links, before, first bonus, creating slices inside Affinity Designer and exporting them to images, and finally, second bonus, using those slices to create a mock-up. And don't forget, all the resources you need to follow along are linked to in the description. If you want new tutorials and tips and tricks on a regular basis, check out my free training at elainegiles.com/VIP. Hit the subscribe button and notification bell so you don't miss future tutorials. And if you have any requests for specific tutorials, be sure to contact me. I would love to hear from you. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.